I love the rich look of upholstered fabric, especially in neutral tones. So today on Stamp TV, I'm going to show you a technique that I call the upholstered background technique, using stamps and pattern paper from the new Hello Sunshine Stamp TV kit. Let me show you the tools and products you need to do this technique. First, you're going to need some stamps. And for the background technique, I'm going to use this leaf stamp. And then these stamps here are going to be part of the finished card project. Then you're going to need some ink, and I'm using the Memento Desert Sand and the Memento Rich Cocoa. You're also going to need some Versamark ink. You're going to need an anti-static pad and some clear embossing powder, and I'm using the Ranger Superfine Detail Clear Powder. You're also going to need some patterned paper for this particular technique, and the patterned paper that I'm using comes from the new Hello Sunshine Pattern Paper Pack. I'm using this white linen paper, and here's what it looks like when you cut a sheet. You can see that little bit of detail in there gives it a nice fabric look. So to begin, I'm going to start by running my anti-static pad across this piece of patterned paper. This is going to remove static from the paper, but it's also going to remove any oil that I might get on the cardstock from my fingers or any dirt or debris that would cause the embossing powder to stick to it instead of just the Versamark ink. Now I'm going to use some Versamark ink and this particular leaf stamp, and I'm going to randomly stamp this image all over this piece of patterned paper. Now this can be a little bit difficult to see, so when you are doing this technique, sometimes you have to actually turn the paper a little bit to the side to pick up the shine where the Versamark is so you don't overlap your images. And if you have to do that, that's okay. It only takes a second to do, and this way your images will be nicely spaced. And you can see as I'm laying down these images, I'm turning them from side to side and turning them around so it doesn't create too much of a pattern. I want this to be very random. Now, when you do this in person, you can kind of see the watermark left behind, especially on this particular pattern paper, and that's nice because then you won't have to worry about overlapping too much. And a little bit of overlap here and there is okay. Okay, just a couple more. I really like the way the Versamark works with the clear stamps. I wasn't so sure about that, whether or not it would work the same way as the rubber, but it really does. You get a nice solid impression with the Versamark ink. Okay, and I think I can lift this up and see. I'm going to do one little leaf right about here. Okay. Now that I've laid that Versamark down, I'm going to grab a piece of scratch paper. This is just a folded piece of cardstock. And I'm going to use that and sprinkle my ink all over that Versamark. Now, pattern paper seems to grab embossing powder a little bit differently than cardstock, so you really do kind of have to blow off the excess to make sure it doesn't stick anywhere. But as long as you use something like an anti-static pad, it'll just blow off very easily. That looks pretty good. You can kind of see, you probably can see that a little bit there. You can see the little impression of the leaves. It's very faint. But once I hit it with the embossing tool, you'll be able to see it very well. And the reason why I use this folded piece of cardstock is it makes it very easy to put the embossing powder back into the jar. Flip that over. Okay, so now I'm going to grab that piece of patterned paper and emboss it with my heat tool. It only takes a few seconds for the clear embossing powder to come up. Once it comes up, you want to move on to the next area so you don't overheat it. and burn it. You want it to stay nice and shiny for this technique. Okay, now I'm going to flip that around and do the other side. You should be able to see that a little bit better now. All of that shine coming out. This is actually very pretty just by itself, so if you're looking for a super delicate background, you could stop right here and just use this piece of paper as your background paper, and it's beautiful. I'll turn it a little bit so that you can see that effect. See that? Isn't that pretty? The way the leaves just shine. Very, very delicate. This might be a beautiful background card for a wedding shower, bridal shower, or a wedding invitation because it's so delicate and it's just nice and shiny, and it's really pretty. Okay, so now my next step is to take one of these sponge daubers and some of the desert sand ink, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over all of the leaves and then kind of just fade into the other area. So I'm going to go right over the leaves like that. And you can see now what's left behind. The leaves almost have a little bit of a gray tint to them. They all start to come out. Now you can also use distress inks for this if you have distress ink pads. That will take just a little bit longer to dry, but you can do some really fun blending techniques with that. Okay, so there's my first pass. Now for my second layer I want to go a little bit darker, so I'm going to grab another sponge dauber and some of the rich cocoa ink. If you have sponge daubers at home, they wash out easily with a little bit of soap and warm water, and then you can let them dry overnight, so you don't have to have a million of them, just a couple of them so that you can use 2 or 3 at a time when you're working on a technique. Okay, so now I'm going to do my second color just over the leaf area. So I'm going to bring those leaves out a little bit more, but I still want that other color to be showing through in the other areas of the card. That gives it some nice dimension. Isn't that fun? Now what I like the most about this particular technique versus other embossed resist is the leaves, even though they've only been embossed in clear, they contain all of that beautiful texture from that linen paper that's underneath. And it's hard to get that effect unless you have some sort of linen stamp or something that you can stamp down first. Okay, so now I'm going to take a piece of paper towel and I'm going to just wipe over all of the leaves, and that's going to remove any excess ink that might be stuck on the top of those leaves. So it's kind of like cleaning up your card, and the leaf images will pop out a little bit more once you get rid of that excess ink. So there we go. Now I have that beautiful upholstered background. Doesn't it just look like a beautiful sofa or chair fabric? Okay. Now my next step for that is, for my card, is going to be to mount that on some of this carnival red cardstock that comes in the kit. And you might not think that these colors would go well together, but they really look nice once it's all together. And let me line that up. Our pattern paper, although it's not cardstock weight, it is paper weight. It's nice and sturdy, so you can really work with it and ink it up well, and it doesn't get too crinkly or warped. So there we go. Now we have that nice little background, that little trim going around the outside. Now I want to show you another fun little thing. I'm going to use one of the tall stemmed flowers from the new Hello Sunshine Stamp TV kit, and I'm going to ink that up with some of the rich cocoa ink. And then I'm going to stamp that in the middle of this little piece that I made. And it's nice that you can see through there because you can get it exactly where you want it. And then I'm also going to ink up this greeting, and I've got just a little scrap here. I'm going to ink this up. And I'm going to stamp this right toward the edge of this little piece of paper. There we go. You're always on my mind. And now I'm going to do something fun. I'm going to do a cheater's bow. And if you've never tried a cheater's bow, they're very fun to do. I have a hole punch here. And this is just a handheld hole punch. You can find these at office supply stores or your local big box hobby store or department store. And I'm going to punch a hole on one side of these stems, and I'm going to punch a hole on the other side of these stems, like that, so you can see the two holes. Then I'm going to take some of this red grosgrain ribbon, and I'm going to cut it to 2 points. I don't need quite that much, but I want to make sure that I can do it right the first time for you here on Stamp TV, so I'm cutting a little bit extra just to give myself some slack. But if you have little strips of ribbon like this laying around in your scrap box, this is a perfect technique to make use of those. So I'm going to feed one end into one hole and the other end into the other hole. So you can see now I have a little loop there and my two strings are coming out the back. Tighten that up a little bit. Now my next step is I'm going to take the one that went into the right side, I'm going to pull it back out the left side. So I'm going to cross them in the back and push that through. You may have noticed that I really cut that to a fine point. So there's one. And now I'm going to flip it over and do the other one. The remaining side is going to go through that hole on the back. There. And now I have this cute little cheater's bow. I'm going to cut that right there and right there. And if you want it to lay down nice and flat, what I like to do is just put a little bit of tape there and just press it down. And a little bit of tape there and just press it down like that. Let's press that one down a little bit lower. There we go. My end is a little bit ratty there, so I think I'll retrim that. And make that side match. There we go. So there is my little cheater's bow on my flowers. So now my next step is going to be to take this little greeting and I'm just going to attach it to the side there. And it's okay to put your greetings on the side once in a while. It gives an interesting little twist to your cards. So I'll put some tape up the side and then I'll just eyeball it here so it looks straight and add the greeting. Now, you can see I used a scratch piece of paper there for my greeting. Now I'm going to put some 1/4 inch pop dots on the back of this just to give it a little bit of dimension on my card. And I'm going to pop this whole panel onto my upholstered background paper that I just created. I like to use a couple extra pop dots when I have an inky surface that I'm sticking it on. It seems to just hold everything a little bit tighter. And then I'm going to center that side to side where I want it, and then press down. There we go. And now this whole card I'm going to place onto my white card base, and here I made a card already, so I don't have to show you how to tape a card panel together. You already know how to do that. There's my finished card project. Try this technique with bold flowers and soft pastels for feminine cards, and try using winter foliage and deep pine green and burgundy inks to create an elegant backdrop for holiday cards.